Today we're going to continue our exploration of negative space paintings. I call this a negative space jewel. As with my other negative space paintings, I'm using a background of some sorts. In this case, I'm using Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s. I applied a light wash using red, yellow, and a little bit of brown. Let it dry completely, and then applied another wash using the same colors. Since I wanted to focus in on a jewel, I wanted to have the jewel appear slightly above the midline horizon point. So I drew in the jewel with a light pencil and then erased the majority of the pencil marks. I'll be using Crayola Colored Pencils, applying them on top of the Caran d'Ache wash. Having applied the outer rim of the jewel, I combined a mixture of orange and yellow to the face of the jewel, blending the two together to create some smooth transitions. I added in Magenta as my third element in my trilogy of colors for the gem. It adds a bit more pop. Now, although I don't think that the Crayola Colored Pencils produces a lot of dust residue, always have a little brush to sweep away the dust particles. Don't use your hand or your finger because the oil in your fingers may smudge the colored pencils. For this gemstone, I'm going to be using only the colored pencils to blend each other out. In future videos with colored pencils, I'm going to try using blender sticks with alcohol and also the colorless blender I got from Prismacolor. And since I'm a complete newbie when it comes to colored pencils, I think it's going to be fun. But first I wanted to check out the blending capabilities of just the colored pencils by themselves. The reason why I'm using the orange, yellow, and magenta for the jewel is because they match the background more or less. But you can use whichever colors you want. Later on in the video, I'll be using blues, grays to augment and create the negative space. I like to use my colored pencils with almost ultra dangerous sharp points. Sometimes I'll go in at an angle, and sometimes I'll go directly using the points. It all depends upon what I'm trying to accomplish. I also tend to go in small circular motions, but sometimes I'll go in like short strokes. Again, it depends upon what I'm trying to do. I'm going in with a blue to augment the shadows that I created with the browns. And this is when I'm starting to work in the negative space. I'm starting to build up the negative space. I'm going to use cool gray first. Then when the initial layer is established, I'll switch then to blue, where I'm doing now. And then I'll switch to gray. And that's coming up soon. So what you'll have is a larger area of the cool gray. Then you'll have a smaller area of the blue, and then an even smaller area for the gray. As you build out the layers of the shadow, you'll go back and forth with the cool gray and the blue and the gray, balancing out one area with the other. And as we add more and more layers to the negative space, what you'll do is you'll start to add in some of the browns to make the shadows even darker. I'm drawing in another layer, or at least the beginning of the layer, under the jewel, and then I'm doing the same process as I did before by using the cool gray, blue, and then the gray. Now during the video, I zoom in sometimes really close up so that you can see the process of what it looks like as you're developing the shadows. But remember, unless you have your face really close to the stone, you're working much further away from the stone than the zoomed in picture is. In fact, as with any kind of rock painting, what I suggest doing is moving it away from you a little bit so that you can see the progress that you're making. Sometimes what can happen is that you become so focused in on an area that you may lose sight of the overall effect. In fact, what I do sometimes is to simply set the stone down and look at what I'm doing. How's the stone progressing? Do I need to add more shadows in one area versus the other to balance them all out? Now here I'm using brown to augment the shadow, but you'll see soon that I'm doing it for another reason too. It's time to add another layer to the negative painting or coloring. Since this section is beneath the initial ribbon, this area needs to be a little darker. So I'm still using the same trilogy of cool gray, blue, and gray, but I'm also introducing the same brown that I use for the stone itself to create more of a contrast to the background. Remember, in negative painting, what you want to do is you want to have, say if you're using 3 layers of the negative painting, the top layer is going to be pretty much the lightest you have. The middle one is going to be a little darker, but not so dark as to be really, really dark. And if you add another layer to the negative space, the background for that negative space will be darker still. Now I'm approaching the backgrounds in a subtle way, slowly building up the shadows, balancing them out with each other so that the shadows are soft and smooth. I recommend this way. However, if you want to be more dramatic and I guess in your face, you can do that as well. Remember, this is your stone, so you can do it however way you want. Now the eye will travel to the first and the lightest or brightest part of anything. And since we've been toning down the background, we need to reintroduce the highlights. I do this by using first yellow and then orange, blending out towards the end or the center. Doing this produces more of a shadow around the edges of the stone, making it more three-dimensional. If you're liking this video, please consider subscribing. I upload new videos twice a week, sometimes 3, on rock painting ideas. I'm adding a little bit of brown underneath the first layer of the negative space, and then a bit more to the space beneath that one. I'm just trying to add more depth to the negative spaces. And since colored pencil is primarily very transparent, I'm going in with a little bit more of a lighter brown. Now, negative space doesn't have to be flat, so I'm adding a little dimension on the edges by introducing just a little bit of a shadow to give it a bit more life and dimension. These little touches can add so much. Now, this stone had a blemish running a straight line. I didn't know if I wanted to incorporate it into the overall design or to just leave it be, but I chose to incorporate it into the structure of the negative space. But I ended up wanting to incorporate it into the overall structure of the negative space, and I'm creating a little bit of an arch and using many of the colors that I use for the negative space backgrounds. And that's one of the joys with exploring negative space paintings. You can add just about anything you want to. When adding a new element to a negative space painting, one thing to consider is how deeply you want the shadows to go. I suggest varying it up a little bit, but you do you. And since we added another layer of the negative space, we want to reinforce some of the colors in the background. By lightening them up, you create more visual interest. Remember, the mind and the eye will gravitate to the lightest part of the painting. And since I like to work in thirds, I'm adding another layer of the negative space, which includes another layer of background. This time, however, I'm using primarily the browns that I use in the other layers. You don't want to introduce a lot of colors into your pieces. By and large, the less colors you add, the more cohesive your piece will be. But again, you can add as many colors as you want. Just make yourself happy. Now here I'm preparing the jewel for the highlights. I'll eventually be using a white acrylic paint pen, but I wanted to lay the groundwork for the area being lightened. So I went in with first yellow, and now I'm going in with a little bit of white, blending them out just a little bit. Now that I've gotten the area a little lighter, I'm going to go in with a acrylic paint pen to create some highlight points for the jewel, and to make the jewel even pop more, I'm reinforcing the shadow around the jewel. Because remember, you always need dark with light. In fact, I'm working on another negative space jewel. This time it's going to be in blues. And because the wash on this one, using Neocolor 2s, played well with the Crayola Colored Pencils, I wanted to experiment with that combo again. Plus, in that one, I'm exploring using blending stumps along with rubbing alcohol, and seeing how they do together in blending the colored pencils. Remember to celebrate each other, celebrate your creative inner voice, and paint along the way. And I hope to see you soon.